It's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com today for more info, or you can always email me directly through Benji at alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive Craig A. Eckert. We're going to be discussing his amazing journal, Rocks, Roots, and Rattlesnakes, a geologist's journal, 150 Days of Discovery on the Appalachian Trail. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com, pretty much all the regular online book resellers. But people, listen to me. If you want to gather everything that Craig has in store, do yourself a favor and head directly to his personal site, and that's Rocks, Roots, and Rattlesnakes.com. There, you're going to find more information on Craig himself, more information on this fantastic book, but people, be on the lookout because this is not the only book that Craig has in store. Now, it's the only book available at this time, but he has another one that's still in creation. That one's called Rocks, Roots, and Rocky Mountains. You're going to want to capture both of these amazing books, and Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Rocks, Roots, and Rattlesnakes.com are the places you have to go in order to do so. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Craig was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, you already know I'm talking about CITI of Books. So for my writers out there listening in, if you have gone through your process, spending some sleepless nights at times creating your masterpiece, and now you've done it. You've gotten to the end of the road, although now you need help moving the book you just developed. If that's you, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give and contact CITI of Books. I'm telling you, they're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what their fantastic team specializes in. So head on over to cityofbooks.com today and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, it is a true pleasure to have Craig here on the line. People, as I mentioned, as it says there in the subtitle, Craig has written a journal, a memoir of sorts of his travels hiking through the Appalachian Trail. Now, this book is magnificent for so many reasons because, A, it's going to inform, it's going to entertain, and it's really covering a whole spectrum of things, right? And it's for a whole spectrum of readers. And at the end of the day, don't take my word for it, take Craig's. It's his book, he's written it, it's his life, he's lived it, and he's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. And please understand, we're only going to capture the essence of the book today. By the time we've concluded, you're going to need to head on over and pick up copies for yourself to gather it all. Craig, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest with us today, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Benji. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to spending the next couple of minutes telling my story.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're looking forward to hearing it. Okay. Before we go into the book, start by telling us a little bบmore about yourself. Who is Craig Eckert?
Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, and I spent most of my childhood, I guess, in the Lehigh Valley area, and then I was in Scouts. So I did do a little bit of hiking on the Appalachian Trail as a kid. I went to Maine on a couple of canoe trips, and so I really enjoyed the outdoors. And into my adulthood, I did a little bit of hiking from time to time, and backpacking, I should say, from time to time. But really, until I retired and had the time to do these long distance hikes, I have really never spent more than about maybe a week on an overnight backpacking trip. So this was something that was somewhat new to me too. I wasn't really sure I was going to be able to do it. So I actually started out not intending to hike the entire Appalachian Trail, but I was going to do about 500 miles from the beginning down in Springer Mountain, Georgia, up through Georgia, North Carolina, a little bit of Tennessee. And then and when I got into Virginia, I was going to stop around Damascus and call it good. Well, I got into it for a couple of weeks, and I thought, I can really do this. And I thought, why not just hike the entire Appalachian Trail? So that's kind of what got me started.
I mean, what a remarkable feat you're talking about. Well, I'm curious because you said that prior to this, you had no intention on hiking the entire trail. And you also mentioned that, you were fairly new to this process as well. So let's go a little bit more in depth with that, Craig. Why did you feel compelled to hike the trail?
I started out planning to do, still 500 miles that's quite a distance, right?
Absolutely.
But I thought, that'll be a good bite to take out of the whole entire trail, firstly. And then, as I said, after a week or so, I began to realize that I think I can actually do this. And so I just continued and made plans to, go the whole distance. Mm-hmm. And it was an amazing journey. It was an amazing adventure. It was a learning experience. I was able to meet some incredible people along the way. And that's part of what makes a trip like this or an adventure like this so interesting is the people that you meet, the things that you see, the alone time you have to think about, what's ahead, what you've just gone through. And it's sort of therapeutic in many ways. And a lot of people do it, in fact. Now, this wasn't my case, but I run into a lot of people when I hike these long distance trails that are out there for a specific reason. They might have had a serious injury and they're trying to heal themselves. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're back from, being in the Army or the Marines, and this is a way of them sort of, reconnecting with civilian life or with normal life. So there's a whole host of reasons that people do it. For me, it was more an adventure, and it was an opportunity to do something on a much grander level than I had ever had the opportunity in my past life to do.
Yeah.
So that's sort of it in a nutshell to get started with.
And that brings up a great point here that or a great question that I want to move into next here, Craig, because the subtitle of your book is 150 Days of Discovery, right? And I think that is such an operative term here. When we're talking about discovery, not only from a geologist perspective, although that is something I'm sure you discovered a tremendous amount with, but talk to our listening audience. What did you discover? What did you learn on this hike?
I've said this about the Appalachian Trail, and I've also said it about the Colorado Trail, which is my second book that I'm in the process of writing about, that you did mention earlier. But I often thought that hiking the Appalachian Trail is one of the best ways to see America, because it immerses you in the individual cultures that are present from one area to another. And the South isn't like Maine, and Maine isn't like Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania isn't like Virginia.
Yeah.
And so as you're moving your way through, and you're stopping in small towns along the way to resupply. And when I say resupply, you can only carry so much food at one time. And so about, on the average, once a week, or sometimes even less than once a week, I would stop in a small town along the way, and I would, stay overnight often at a hostel, meet people who are both hiking the trail and staying for the same reasons that I am. But you're also meeting people who live in those parts of the country, and this is their home, and this is, and they have their own culture and their own way of seeing the world. So, that's incredibly interesting too. And it's just a transition from one, and I don't want to necessarily emphasize the word culture because it's more than that.
Yeah.
But it's transferring from, one part of the world and their way of life and so forth to the next and to the next and so forth. And it's really incredible as you look back on that, how that changes as you move your way along, and then the trail is what sort of ties all of that together.
Mm-hmm. People, it's Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's Rocks, Roots, and Rattlesnakes.com. Head on over there today, purchase your copies, and get lost in it. As he's mentioned, as I've mentioned as well, check back in frequently because you're going to want to get his other book, Rocks, Roots, and Rocky Mountains, the moment it is available, because it is absolutely, I mean, it's just captivating. People, there's no other way around it. This is such a magnificent insight into something that, I mean, listen, can we just talk about the fact that he is just casually throwing out 500 miles of a hiking experience? Like, that is something normal. People, I'm lucky if I get 5 miles on a hiking trail. My goodness, 500? People, this is something impressive. You want to be a part of this, I'm telling you. You know, Craig, from a geologist perspective, because I do think that is a very key part to this, because by no means is your book the first book to be written about a hiker's experience. Your book is not the first book to be written about the Appalachian Trail, right? And the hiking experience given with that. Right. So it is very key that you're talking about this from a geologist perspective. Well, you know, I know you're biased, but I want to hear it from you, Craig. Why does geology even matter? I mean, what do we learn when we're on the hikes and immersed in nature in that way? Connect the two for us.
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's really obviously a big part of the book. But as a geologist, I also recognize that not everybody is a geologist. And so when they hear the story of how the mountains came to be, of how of why the rocks look the way they do and how they got to where they are, not everybody is as keenly interested in it as I might be, or as perhaps another geologist might be. So the way that I wrote the book was first to start off with sort of an overview of, you know, how the Appalachians evolved over time, over geologic time, and I won't go into a lot of details, of course, when I'm explaining this, but you know, there were several mountain building events that took place in the eastern part of what's now, you know, North America, and it, you know, caused mountains to form. They eroded, they formed again, they eroded, and different types of things were going on tectonically, geologically, that resulted in the mountains that we see today. And the evidence for that lies in the rocks that you come across as you're hiking every day. I mean, you're stepping on rocks with every footstep. And if you're tuned into that, and if you're paying attention, you know, those rocks can really speak to you, and they tell a story. And so I tried to tell that story in a way that I think anybody can understand and appreciate. And so that was sort of an underlying theme throughout the entire book. And as you mentioned earlier, I think it's what sets this book apart from all the other books that have been written by thru hikers who had thru hiked the Appalachian Trail.
Absolutely.
And so I might also add to that there's so much to say, and if you are a geologist reading this, you know, you might come away with the thought that, well, what about, you know, this and this and this? You could write 100 volumes about the geology of the Appalachians. Mm-hmm. So this is it's a rather watered down, but I do go into enough detail to make the point of how the rocks got to where they are, but I don't necessarily want to, you know, belabor any one point too much. So, you know, so it doesn't appeal to the majority of the readers. You know, but it was as enjoyable to go through the thru hike as it was to go through the process of writing it and having a book come out of it. Yeah.
You know, I'm glad that you mentioned that last part here, Craig, because, you know, it connects to a lot of things. Because people, look, I don't know if you caught it, you know, but Craig said it's a watered down version. Well, I interpret that as to mean it's for the everyday person. All right. This is a book for you. This is a book for me. Okay. Whether you're a geologist or not, you're going to be able to take this book and run with it because it's accessible. And one thing that, even though I'm a novice, one thing that I am always in awe with whenever I have any hikes that I go on is how much of a humbling experience being out in nature and hiking truly is. You know, because he mentioned how with each step, every rock has a different story that it's telling you. And I love that, the imagery behind it. I love what that particular statement symbolizes, because again, when I hear that, I'm shuffling through the Rolodex of memories of my hikes that I've taken in years past. But how every time I'm out there, I just can't help but be struck with the realization of this landscape that you are currently traveling on has been around much longer than you have. And all of the stories that this particular tree, this particular rock can tell, if it could speak, the lives that it has seen, the stories that it can tell. And again, I can't help but just come back to how humbling that is, because a lot of times I think just as human beings, and I'll be the first to put my hand up and take ownership for this statement, how often I get so engulfed in my life, and understandably so, it's our lives, this is what we are living, but how often do we get caught up in thinking that we are the center of the universe and the entire world revolves around us? And when you're out in nature that way, there's something about how it just smacks you in the face with the realization of you are one tiny piece in this massive puzzle that is comprised and put together. And I love that about your book, Craig, because this is what it symbolizes in such a wonderful way. Craig, as we start to close out here, man, you have another book that you are in the process of completing. It's called Rocks, Roots, and Rocky Mountains. You've already started to go into it a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about that book and what to expect once we pick it up.
Well, it's similarly written in terms of the format. It was a much shorter hike. It was a 500-mile versus a 2,000, approximately 2,200-mile journey for the Appalachian Trail. The Colorado Trail is just under 500 miles. And so rather than taking me 5.5 months, as the case for the Appalachian Trail, my Rocky Mountain trip along the Colorado Trail was 33 days. The Rocky Mountains are very different from the Appalachian Mountains, in terms of, their size, their origin, the effects from various tectonic events that shaped them, the glacial stages in the last million or so years, part of the Pleistocene that sculpted them with ice. It was a different type of glaciation than the glaciation that we saw in the east. But nevertheless, the rocks that we see today in the Rocky Mountains they're different in so many ways. There are some similarities, of course, but they're different in so many ways. They're laid bare by the climate, by the altitude, and so when you're hiking out there, rather than hiking around 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 feet in elevation, as is the case with the Appalachians, when you're out in the Rockies, you're up around 12 or 13,000 most of the time. And the views you have, because there's so little vegetation, or really very little, if any, once you get above tree line, and you're above tree line a lot of the time. I mean, the spectacular beauty, it's overwhelming. And it's just a very different experience. And so I try to go into, a similar description of how the rocks got to where they are. And of course, it's a different story. But I also talk a lot about the adventures I had every day and the crazy weather because you're so high in in altitudinally, and almost every day there's thunderstorms, and it's quite an amazing adventure. So that's what's in store for you in the next book.
I'm convinced. I know you all are as well. This is a book that needs to be added to your shelf. The journey that you're going to be able to take, how you will be able to journey outside the borders of your home into these magnificent trails and being out in nature. It's going to inspire you to want to go out and hike. I'm already feeling it. Like this weekend, I know what I'm doing. Again, people, it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Rocks, Roots, and Rattlesnakes.com. Pick up copies of this magnificent book. And just in case you didn't catch it before, I'm going to re-impress it one last time. There's another book. It's called Rocks, Roots, and Rocky Mountains. Pick up that one the moment it becomes available as well. You can thank me later because these books are absolutely magnificent from so many different perspectives. Greg, this has been a true pleasure. Man, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Well, thank you so much, Benji. It was a pleasure. It was all mine. I think you do a fantastic job, and you're doing what you should be doing.